And good evening, everyone. Gary Redmond here at your service for episode 160 of New York Red Bull Discussion Group, the podcast. Miguel Nunez and Carlos Cano, your actual stars of the program, will be with you very shortly. So, what do we got to talk about today? Well, not that much, okay? After all, we lost the Derby, and for the foreseeable future, until somebody says otherwise, New York is blue. Yeah, I said it. New York is blue. And the reason for that is we're going to have a nice little recap of what happened on Saturday night, where mistakes were made and they could not recover because of it. And that game, of course, is New York Red Bulls versus New York City FC. We'll be talking about who to blame, who to point the finger, and then there was a slightly ugly incident at the end of the match, and we'll talk about that as well. But no time to commiserate, because you got to hope and some teams do you a solid, and that is because our next game will take place next Saturday at the same venue, where FC Cincinnati comes to town, looking to basically bury us for good. And if we lose that game, well, all depends on the results that's going to happen this week, which may put that situation moot. Okay. Also, we're going to be talking about updates and reviews and previews. New York, New Jersey, Gotham FC took on Portland Thorns. They had a very good weekend. New York Red Bulls 2, they play on Wednesday. And we'll put a little preview on that. Now, of course, as always, the live stream is happening right now. We welcome you guys here. We see a lot of comments coming in. You can catch the if you happen to miss it, no big deal. Okay, as always, you can catch the recording, of course, on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe from there, and tell your friends. We just wound up with our 100th subscriber, so we're doing pretty good. The numbers going up. YouTube channel, X, formerly of Twitter, and of course our home from the very beginning, Spotify.com. If you missed the live show, once again, don't worry. You can wait until Wednesday at midnight, because that will be all new episodes will be loaded by then. And of course, as always, if you have any questions, comments about the podcast or guests, about the show in general, feel free to drop us a line in our email address, which is rbdgthepodcast@gmail.com. Once again, rbdgthepodcast, one word, @gmail.com. We always like to read those emails that you bring in, and we sometimes drop a lot of them even after the show has concluded. So feel free to drop a line if you have any questions. So that's basically it, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, we stand now at the precipice of doing something that hasn't happened since 1990. My goodness, it's been 15 years since we missed the playoffs. And there's a lot of trepidation over me, and there's a lot of anger and resentment and finger pointing and absolute people going bonkers over the loss. I'm not thinking, as I bring in, of course, two of my co-hosts, of course, the wonderful Carlos Cano, making his triumphant return while he's on the road, ladies and gentlemen. This is how badass he is, okay? Wow. Okay, doing this from a hotel room while on the road, and of course, live, of course, from Casa de Nunez, of course, in Paterson, New Jersey, the one and only, the Viper.
No. Paramus, New Jersey.
Thank you, Paramus, New Jersey. Why do I get these two towns messed up? I don't.
Listen.
Why do I get these two towns messed up with you?
Listen. Picturesque Paramus, New Jersey.
Thank you. Picturesque Paramus, New Jersey, the one and only, the Viper, making his triumphant return from illness. It's still hanging in there. Look, man, my heart goes out to you, as I love you like a brother and whatnot. We were very, worried about you when you came down with COVID, but we're glad to see you back here, man.
I wasn't worried. I'm vaccinated, okay? But this, I felt like I ran a marathon and everything.
But you stood still, didn't you?
Well, yeah. I was curled up in bed. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
All right, let's get down to brass tacks, right? The one question I have for the both of you: what in the world would you anticipating? What you were more expecting before kickoff? Let's start there.
Okay, yeah, I was anticipating a loss. Okay, that's it. There's nothing to it. They have a better team than us. Okay.
Was this before and now after the fact?
No, this is before.
Okay.
I said we're gonna lose. I can't imagine somebody predicted we're gonna win this game. Okay, but Carlos, give us your opinion. Thank you.
Well, look, I don't, this is probably super naive and, me being fanboy, but, this team frustrates me to no end. We all know this. It frustrates all of us.
It's all of us to
But
no end.
I've always maintained, right, that my gripe for a long time has always been with the front office and not with the players on the field, right? Like the players on the field, they're doing what they're told, right? And we can critique and argue left and right. Some of these guys shouldn't be on the field, etc., right? But if you put yourselves in their shoes, you have a contract to play. Your coach tells you to go out and play. You go out and play, right? So I can't go into any game feeling or thinking like the team's going to lose. I always believe that they're going to win. Now, look, once the whistle blows and things start to happen, then sure, like you can start to look down a certain path and think, yeah, this is not going to happen, right? So, the game on Saturday was literally a roller coaster, right? Because they give up the lead early, they equalized, and we go back and forth. And then, all the way up until the end, right? At the end of the day, they had to win. This was as much of a must win. We talk about must wins over the course of the season. Saturday was a must win. We know that they're not mathematically eliminated, but now they don't control their destiny. They didn't control their destiny on Saturday either.
Nope.
But they basically, again, the odds are slim. They have to win out, and they have to pray that the Fire, who are riding some momentum, lose out in order to have any chance of trying to get in. Now you have Cincinnati again, and then the worst part of it is, right, as if the odds aren't stacked against us already. We finish off the season with Cincinnati and Columbus, who have never been generous to us by any stretch of the imagination, right?
No.
So, so here we are, right? And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about it at, more at nauseam. We've been talking about it all season. The personnel is not, what it is, what it should be. The summer window was a complete and utter disappointment by every stretch of the imagination. But again, I can't be mad at the squad. I can't be mad at the players. Yeah, I can critique their performance and be frustrated by it. But my gripe has always been with the front office and their lack of activity and their lack of taking appropriate action based on what's happened this season.
And also, Garry, if I may add, regarding the players, okay, there are several, Garry, and we were talking about this before the show. There are several that are not at the level that's required for this competition. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that, of course, ad nauseum. We're going to be talking about that even more after the break. My thought process before the match was I had a good feeling of it. Okay. And this was buoyed by, my trip to Montreal. And that place has always given the Red Bulls fits, as you all know. Every time we go up there, we wound up with a loss going back over the border. So the fact that they went up there and took care of business, and not only that, they scored 2 goals against an arguably very bad CF Montreal team, gave the fan base a little hope, a smidgen of hope, okay, going into this one. And of course, they looked at how Inter Miami slapped the living daylights out of NYCFC over in City Field. Messi just simply danced around their defense. We weren't talking about a good team versus even a better team, because we were basically a superstar with godlike powers that can just simply levitate his way over defenses and put in goals to a 4-0 loss. Okay. I was a little worried about that, because I was like, great, now the guys are pissed off. They're coming into the Derby. They want to, they want to right the ship. We're going to see, how this game. Anthony and I were basically thinking about a 2-1 win for the Red Bull. And one thing we did say, hold on, Miguel. One thing we did say, this was going to be a rock fight. Okay. One team is simply to put those guys on the sword. Another team fighting for their very lives. Okay. As far as the playoffs are concerned. So you're setting the scene up for what is going to be drama, right? That very night. Okay. Where, fans came out, filled the building. It was a good crowd. You got a lot of City fans. There were even more Red Bull fans. They came out. They showed up. Okay, they did their thing. They were ready, to, cheer on for the boys. It was an atmosphere which was just expected, just what you expect for, for a derby match. Okay. But then the match started. And for that, we go to the recap and basically we'll let the video pretty much tell the
way it should be for the big occasion. And here we go before a packed house Saturday night, late September in Harrison. Glad you've joined us tonight on MLS Season Pass as Carlos Coronel, Justin Hack with the takeaway for New York City, plays it ahead. Nico Fernandez-Mercado with the early goal, and City flying early at Sports Illustrated Stadium.
Does the rest. The problem the Red Bulls had, they're in possession of the ball, they're taking the throw in, so they're going to be out of position. And because of that, the turnover occurs in Red Bulls' half. Brilliant.
4 into the attack for the Red Bulls, played ahead by Forsberg. Choupo-Moting on the move. Still Choupo-Moting. Hall, Tage!
A young striker, he understands where the space is. Defenders running back to the goal, he steps back.
Agustin Ojeda with the game level at 1. O'Neal. Gustavo off that left foot, and that ball is in the back of the net. Oh, Coronel was frozen. 2-1 game. It's Andres Pereira.
What's that, brother?
And just like that, City is back on top.
They're most vulnerable, but give great credit to Pereira because he gets forward. We know how good he is. For me, he's a wonderful 8. He'll get forward, he'll get himself into the box, and he knows exactly what he's doing here. He knows exactly what he's doing. It's a nightmare for Coronel because Coronel's drifting back. He thinks he's going to go over the bar, but he just dips. But I want to give great credit to Pereira because he's not flicking that towards the far post. He's had a look at Coronel, understood that Coronel is off his line, and it's just a magnificent header to put NYC back in the lead. And what a game this is. You talk about responses.
Switch to the left side, brought down there. Hannes Wolf wins it back from Carmona. Wolf able to play that ball ahead, and this ball goes wide. Flag went up, but dangerous doings again in the Red Bull area. Back the other way. Fernandez-Mercado has Berggren to beat. Fernandez-Mercado gets by him, tries to play this centrally, and the chance is over the bar. Nearly a third. Send it away, and Freeze gave it away to Carmona. Wiki Carmona, Choupo-Moting plays this, top of the box,
You just see here, Freeze, like I say, he's been near enough perfect this season. But this is a mistake from him. Carmona plays it to Choupo-Moting, and just when you want your star man to turn.
Here's Pereira, does well to get that ball to Fernandez-Mercado. Switch to the right side, take it here. Ojeda gives it a go and fires wide. So close to giving his team the lead. Mercado are the options here. This ball sent in, goal! New York City has the lead for the third time tonight. And it's Thiago Martins, the man who had the big miss against Miami midweek.
But it's NYC players in blue that get themselves into a position.
Given away by Berggren. Here's New York City looking for a fourth. Coronel with the stop. Follow-up try. And a shot takes a deflection. It's in. But the flag goes up.
The game, but it just wasn't to be. And it's just Red Bulls, just when they're playing with the ball, just when you see the ball being played here. Oh, that is really, really close. I'm not too sure. that this is offside. I'm really not, because we know the offside has been given against Fernandez.
Forsberg in the big moment, looking to meet it. Forsberg in. Hack! Plays it across, broken up off the line, and Romero is there to pick it away.
Takes the header, and he does well to get it on target, but I think Sean Nealis is in a better position behind him. He's even running onto it more. Hack's actually running away from the ball, so it's difficult for him to get power on it. I think Sean Nealis, you can see his diagonal run, he's running towards it. I think if Sean Nealis is able to...
Played ahead by Justin Hack. Booted long by the Red Bulls. Surely their last chance. Off the head of Ayla. He's turned around. That is all full time. New York City comes to Sports Illustrated Stadium. What a win.
And there it is.
Love the sound effects, Garry.
Final score.
Yeah.
New York City 3, New York Red Bulls 2. Hall and Forsberg were the only two tallies. Fernandez, Pereira, and of course Martins for New York City. That first goal 2 minutes in by Mr. Fernandez pretty much sucked the entire air out of the building. That was how dramatic it was. Excuse me, Forsberg, that's his 11th goal and 10 a goal from what can we say about Emil Forsberg? But we've been talking about this all season long, right, fellas? Just having Forsberg was just simply not enough. The one thing that I was hoping you guys would notice, all right, did you see how soft that defensive midfield was? Okay, and they ran through those guys like they were paper, okay? There was no holdup. There was no tackle. There was none of that. Okay. We knew that City had a very strong, counterattack game. We've known this, but there was no stiff, there was no, I mean, you put your defense to the sword that way. And then, as I said in the follow-up after the interviews and in the final piece, I said, it doesn't matter how good you are, but if you're going to make mistakes, okay, like a good team like NYCFC, you don't win. It's that simple, okay? We can talk about injuries to this player, that player, all we want. But when you have a team that's going to wilt under, the pressure, high pressure of a derby, that tells me that the players you have on the field are pretty good, but not good enough. I mean, 2-3 mistakes, it pretty much unravels your game plan, and now you're playing catch-up against NYCFC. Good luck, okay? Never mind NYCFC. What about, we've seen this with Miami. We've seen this with Philly. I mean, I can go on, okay? But, when it really comes down to is what you just said, Miguel. We need better ballers. We need guys who are veteran enough not to wilt in pressure situations like that. I've got nothing against the guys at Red Bull too, but there are some guys who unfortunately still be there. Carlos, your words, man.
Well, I think if we want to start to dissect the game itself, right, from a tactical perspective, like you said, you hit the nail on the head, right? There was, in terms of the midfield, particularly on the defensive side, there's nothing there, right? There's nothing happening. So what does that create? If you noticed, Forsberg was checking back way deeper into the defensive end than he should. And then the problem is that once you do that, you put Chupo on an island on his own, right? He has no support because you're asking Forsberg to come back. We're not asking him. I mean, I think, quite frankly, he was just coming back because nothing else was happening in the midfield on the defensive side of the ball. So he's like, you know what? I've got to make something happen here. And that's what a player of his caliber is supposed to do. That's why you bring him in. That's why he's on the squad and he's your captain. But to your point, Garry, it can't just be him, right? You can't ask him to basically be lights out all over the field and expect him to do that game in and game out. I mean, he did it.
You can't expect your attacking midfielder to do the job what a defensive midfielder is supposed to do. Okay, and that's the disjoint there. And
then what happens too, and what happened Saturday, right, is because of that, and because of the fact that, again, the defensive midfield was practically non-existent, you now expose, a center back who, I'm sorry, I love Tim Parker, but Tim Parker shouldn't have started that game, in my opinion.
Nope.
Parker's at the stage of his career where, he gets a spot start here and there, in my opinion, and
or
he comes
late,
off the bench
to close out games. That's it.
Close out games, but he was getting exposed because here's the two problems that I saw, of course, were given the fact that, again, the defensive midfield was non-existent, you're now exposed on the counter. So that, of course, was...
And they are a great counterattack team.
And then we saw what we've seen more often than not from this club for years upon end, and I've said this ad nauseum during my time on the podcast, is that there's no creativity off the ball.
None.
Someone has the ball at their feet, and everyone else is just watching.
Right. One Mississippi, two Mississippi, three Mississippi. Move the ball.
You have players like, and again, and I was saying this during the thread, right? And so many people were, and there were a couple of things on the thread that really ticked me off. For starters, number one, which I agreed with everyone. Again, I don't know what the deal's been with Wiki. He should not be out on the field. He should not be starting, much less. I don't even think he belongs on the bench. That's beyond apparent.
Wow.
90% of the time,
people are asking me, maybe you should keep him with him. Well, who are you going to replace him with?
Well, that's the problem, right? So I totally get it.
The reason why he's on the field in the first place is because the guy who he usually replaces is injured for the year. The other guy that, not to cut you off, the other guy that, that he usually, usually come off the bench, he's out for the year. So it's almost like, I saw the thread and I shook my head, right? Like, okay, I understand about Wiki. I get it. Okay.
Right. But I think the point is, Garry, is that Wiki's he's been run out there for weeks upon end at this point.
Yes.
At this point, do something else. Like if I'm Sandro, I'm just like, you know what? I understand where I'm at. Like I understand that the depth is pretty much like not there, but I need to do something else because Wiki gets the ball at his feet. He's facing the attacking end. He stops, turns around, and passes it back. That's his game. He doesn't do anything else. And not to mention, let's remember, and this leads to what ticked me off in the thread from some of our peers in the group. That first goal, 2 minutes in, wasn't on anyone else but Wiki because Wiki loses the ball, fails to track back to make any kind of attempt to get it. Then you add the layers that the defense gets caught flat-footed, right, trying to get back off that takeaway. They get played out. Meanwhile, you have the thread who's saying, bench Coronel. Are you kidding me? Coronel is arguably the best player you have on the field right now.
There was nothing that Coronel could do.
Like, he's the least of anyone's problems. Like, folks, we need to stop and try at least to understand and watch what's happening. Our goalkeeper, who's statistically one of the best goalkeepers in the league, is not the problem.
No,
he's not the problem.
He constantly gets hung up.
Everyone else is the problem, and that the first goal totally on Wiki. The second goal, which again there was a huge outlash of, oh my God, bench. That's when all the bench Coronel comments started coming out. I'm like, folks, pipe down. That's a 50-50 ball that any goalkeeper, the best goalkeeper in the world on their best day, loses track of, because if you're looking at it from a certain angle, you think it's going to go over, and it lollipopped in. Like, that's unlucky. That's 50-50 at best. Like you could say Cornell was off his. You could say Cornell was off his line, and that's how he got played. But again, even if he's on his line and he's seeing the ball come down, he's thinking it's going to go over, and it doesn't. Again, I'm not blaming him for that. Again, long story short, Cornell's the least of our problems. People calling for bench him. Stop yourselves. We have bigger problems than our goalkeeper, again, is arguably the best player on the field that's not an attacking player. Let's stop, please, and thank you.
Okay.
Carlos, I agree with every word that you've just spoken there, Carlos. Every word. I can't believe it. I can't believe somebody has my exact feelings on players like Wiki Carmona, man. Okay? And there are several more that do not deserve to be on the bench on this team. But whatever. Go ahead, Garry.
All right. Well, to answer, Javier's question, he brought a very good point. So he's like saying, so Rossborough, Mehmeti, and Rojas are that raw. They can't do a better job than Wiki. We don't know because they're not up on the first team all the time. I can easily answer that question. And if that's okay, and if that was the case, yeah, but that's also part of the problem. A lot of these guys are brought up, and it's a saying, are they ready or they're not, or they're ready or they're not. I mean, I go back to the 2018 team, okay? This was a team that was loaded from bench to pitch. Even the guys from New York Red Bull 2 were MLS ready. This was a squad of ballers. Were they perfect? Lord, no, they were not perfect. But they amassed a single season record of points, okay, in MLS history. That can't be ignored. The only sad part was the team they literally housed all year, Atlanta United, lost only once at the wrong time on that turf, at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Okay, all because of a tactical change by the coach. That was my only argument. People will say, "Well, yep, my coach Chris Harmers." My argument with then, and still is. I mean, I actually had, I had argument, with Mr. Fernandez. I said, "Hey, don't tell me that one." You said, "Well," one guy said, "No, you stick with the plan, even with a missing player. Sure, Taxi." Taxi versus me. Yeah, I mean that's that's not the contest. But you stick with the plan. One player is not going to derail your season, and if it is, then there's something wrong with that roster. Well, we all know we all know the history from that. And I agree with you 110%, Javier. NYCFC has speed on the flanks. They murdered the Red Bulls on the flanks. Flat out murdered them. There was, and why is that? There was nobody in the midfield that can slow these guys down. Nobody can slow them down. You saw what they did. They spun Breger in like a top. Okay. Going into the corner, flipped them around like a pizza, and then they were off into the box like that.
Let me ask you something, Garry. Now that you bring that guy up, we can't get better in MLS on that guy? Come on.
I'm giving him a break because he just got here. But you're right, though. I mean, are you saying that we should, are you saying that we should get better than that? Well, of course. Of course.
I mean, if we're going to bring a guy from Europe overseas, shouldn't he be like a guy, a DP? Come on, man.
No. I mean, to be honest with you, you stick with what got you. Bregerin, he just got here. He's just what he's been here like how many? 10 games so far? 5 games so far? He's been thrown right into the fire. He's had good games. He's had bad games. Okay, I don't know where they're gonna put this dude. Is he gonna be on top, on the offense or in the back? One thing I do know, he's not a defensive mid. He ain't. Because his defense is horrible. People run right through him. You know what I'm saying? Oh my Lord! They need to you need to shift him somewhere or get him off the field because they're running ragged around him. I was really concerned, but then again, the foul by Kyle Duncan that led to the set piece that led to the third goal. This is what I mean by mistakes. And it basically exposed your game plan and basically exposed your team. So I'm not so angry that they lost to NYCFC, gentlemen. I'm angry at the way they lost. Of course, me sitting in the press box, I can't show my emotions, but I felt tired after the game because it's like, where we've seen this nonsense before. Saw this against Philly. We saw this against Cincinnati. We saw this against Miami, and so on and so on. One or two little mistakes, and it unravels the anything. Despite that, there was something I did notice, okay? Hall playing up with Chupo. What do you think about that? What do you think about that pairing? Hall with Chupo.
See it for long enough because Hall gets subbed off again. Don't understand
why.
And I understand that from a coaching standpoint, you have certain practices that you stick with and moves that you anticipate that you're going to make and whatnot, right? And I certainly don't pretend to be the know-it-all about coaching because I don't coach, right? I can only go by what I see from years of watching the game. Right. And, when Hall came off, again, I'm wondering why. This is a young kid who is hungry. He, has a goal in the game.
Yep. Nose for goal.
Provides some speed up top. I think if anything was providing, at least some kind of support to Chupo with Forsberg again, having to trek back so often during the course of the game, and he gets subbed out. And, to what end, right? Nealis, I'm pretty sure he came in for Nealis came in on his behalf with the final sub, right? Which they got the extra sub because of the, concussion protocol and whatnot, because the goalkeeper came off for NYCFC. But again, to what end? Right. I would love to see him more. I hope that we get to see him more the last, couple of games of the season. And I think for me, that's really what it's all about, right? At this point, you have to leave it all out there. Like, what what is anyone saving anything for at this point, right?
Time to empty the clip.
You got to empty the clip, right? And then just, and then take it from there on the super ridiculous out chance that you do make it in by the skin of your teeth. But you've got to empty the clip now because what more is there, right? And I think, for me, that's been probably the biggest frustration is that, I totally hear what you're saying, Garry, in terms of sticking to the plan and whatnot. The fact of the matter is the plan went out the window the second we lost Morgan and we lost Harper and we lost all these other folks to injury. And again, the summer window came, and, we made lackluster signings and not in areas that, not in areas that we needed.
Which we're going to talk more. We're going to talk more about that in the second half. Here's the situation in case anybody has forgotten. Right now, the Red Bulls sit, of course, in 10th place with 43 points. Chicago has 48, and they have a game in hand. Speaking of that game in hand, they face Inter Miami tomorrow. Kickoff is at 7:30. As Carlos alluded to earlier, as a matter of fact, he did it, pretty much, nailed it on the head. The only way the Red Bulls make the playoffs is that they win outright. First, they got to fight past FC Cincinnati. Then they got to go to Columbus on decision day. And before all that happens, they got to hope that Chicago pulls the worst time to have a 3-game losing streak. I don't think that's going to happen based on the momentum these guys have, but that's where the Red Bulls are standing. If not, my suggestion to everybody in the group and elsewhere, please plan your your activities in the fall accordingly, because at that point the season will be over. Speaking about FC Cincinnati, we're going to take a break and we're going to talk about our next opponent. Carlos is going to give the rundown on why that may be the definitive game of the season for the Red Bulls, and they need to take care of business then. Before that happens, here is week 37 of Major League Soccer. FC Cincinnati comes into Sports Illustrated Stadium looking to bury the New York Red Bulls in their playoff aspirations once and, of course, for all. But before we even talk about that game, Carlos is going to give us the rundown of how FC Cincinnati has been doing since the last time we faced them over at TQL Stadium way early in the season. I believe it was in it was in March, week 2, I believe, of the season. So, Carlos, what's been going on with FC Cincinnati since then? Can you tell us?
That is an excellent question. So, FC Cincinnati is coming off a draw versus Orlando. And before that, they won 2 games and lost 2 games. So they lost 2 games, 1-0, and then a 2-1 victory over Nashville, a 3-2 victory over the Galaxy, and then, like I mentioned, this 1-1 draw was their most recent fixture. They currently find themselves, obviously, already in for the playoffs. They're in second place, obviously trailing behind the Union. So they're locked in and ready to go. So, again, you can, so they're down. I mean, they're still in contention for the Supporters Shield. They're at 59 points. The Union have 63. And so we go, into this match on Saturday, and I know there was a lot of banter in the thread, not only in the thread, but in the group altogether. So reminder that the path is down this weekend.
Yep.
Shuttle buses from Journal Square to Harrison if you're going to the game. So definitely want to make some extra time if you're heading to RBA for the game itself. But look, Cincinnati is in, so they're coasting and cruising, but Lord knows that, they're not by any chance going to give the Red Bulls a gimme. They're obviously going to go out, and they're going to go out for blood. So, keep that in mind, right? And like I said before the break, this team has to go for broke now, and they're at home, so they have to leverage that. They've typically done well at home versus Cincinnati, but we also know that those games are highly contested. There's always, a little bit of bad blood. Miazga obviously coming back into the building, for that game. And
how much would you pay to have him back in the back line?
I don't know. He's kind of a tool. I don't know that I want him back. But I suppose he's that guy that when he's on your team, it's like, yeah, sure, like, great, like, be that guy. But when he's not on your team, I don't know. Not so much. So, I mean, and even then, I'm saying Miazga's out with an injury, so he won't even come into play. The Cincinnati has a couple of guys that will be out, but again, they are managing, fairly well, and that's what you expect a good team to do, right? They've currently got 5 players out with an injury, but they are hanging tight at the pretty much the top of the conference, and still very much in contention for the Supporters Shield, right? So, that's where we are. Again, remember, if you're taking the path, there is no path this weekend, so keep that in mind. I'm also looking to see, because ironically, like I said during the thread, I'm literally like 5 miles down the road from Chase Stadium, and looking to see if it's feasible for me to get into that stadium. But let me tell you, folks, these tickets are not budget friendly by any stretch of the imagination.
Hey, but you got the number one player in the world, in your roster. Of course, you're going to pay top dollar just to go and put eyeballs on him. Miguel, this is make or break for the Red Bulls. I know you have a very dim view, and on these guys. Despite it all, is there a glimmer of hope for the fans, to come and show up at this game, or they're better off just simply not showing up at all? Your thoughts?
No. If you're able to show up, please show up and support the team. If I were a betting man, Garry, I wouldn't put a tenner on the Rebels making the playoffs. Okay, the odds are stacked so high against them.
Well, it all depends on what happens tomorrow night. If Chicago gets it, if Chicago even gets this no much as a point, they're in. Their magic number is 2, I believe.
Chicago has 3 tries.
Yeah, they got 3 tries
to get those 2 points.
That's going to be the most hardest 3 points in history.
Come on.
But first, they got to get past Miami, Miami's got aspirations of their own. They're sitting in 4th. They want to finish it off in 2nd. So maybe second, maybe first. They got 4 games ahead of them. So this is going to be interesting. Like I said, this is going to be one of those matches, Miguel. I agree with you, where they have to take it. They have to hope and pray that Chicago goes into a tailspin and everything else. And now we get to the point where we want to discuss about the roster for the New York Red Bulls, because we know we have 2 games left before that, and I did mention earlier that there are some guys on the bench that, quite frankly, are just simply not ballers. They're not ballers. Okay. I believe, from what I'm hearing, is that there's going to be a massive turnover when it's all said and done. There are some guys who are not going to be here. Coronel is up for a contract renegotiation. I keep him if they can. If not, AJ, coming off an injury, he might be able to step in. You signed another keeper who's probably so, but then again, he's come, from the LA Galaxy. There's one thing that the Rebel organization does pretty well, is that they develop, goalkeepers, and able to sign, pretty good guys. They're not in the same stratosphere as Luis Robles as concerned, but decent enough. That's why I figured you focus on trying to keep him under wraps and then strengthen the spine, for crying out loud. And the way you're going to do that is that you chuck out some of these guys and these midfielders who are just simply not up to snuff. They're not. Okay. Stevie Wonder can see that they're not up to snuff. Okay. We need veterans back there. We need guys who've been there and done that. And filling it up with young and hungry guys, while that is admirable, okay, while that's admirable and it pretty, it can be pretty, handy, when it comes down to it. But unless those guys, Carlos, Miguel, are exceptional, I don't think you want to bank your season on that when Chupo and Email are going to need help. They are. And, folks were telling me, we should get rid of Lewis Morgan. He gets hurt all the time. He's on a contract. Can't get rid of him. And, other than Mark going absolutely ape, if you get rid of Harper, because he loves that boy, okay? Harper was having a season before his injury. Y'all know this, okay? He was having a very good season before his injury. But when you're talking about the type of injury he has, will he be just as effective as he was before the injury. And that's the same thing with Lewis Morgan. Will he be back 100%? 100%. Will he be the lethal, Scottish assassin up front, or will he be half strength? Okay? That's a lot of ifs there. I like certainties, but to me, at least strengthen the defense, okay, a little bit before before you think of signing any big name baller, and with that, that comes to the front office. And when they talk about the front office, remember there are two sides of the same coin. You have the business side of New York Red Bull. They're in charge of the ticket sales, the promotions, the fan experiences, and all that other good stuff that causes teams, right, guys, to make the paper and everything else. And then you have the sporting side. And the sporting side is a little bit of a flux, and where I draw my big red circle on, because it seems to me that you've got guys who don't know what they're doing. We see it every game. And then there are guys, I don't know what goes on between, Jochen Schneider and, of course, Julian de Guzman. It seems like two guys are basically doing the same thing, but either they're getting in each other's way or they're counteracting one another. I would focus on that, finding, okay, what's going on with you two? Why can't you get players that are worthy enough, MLS quality for that matter, to play for the Red Bulls? What's the deal with you guys? And please spare me when Anthony tells me, well, they'd rather do it the German way. You can able to do the German way and get quality ballers. That's how I feel about it. I mean, as much as the guys come up from New York Red Bull too, they're not ballers. Not yet anyway. And they need seasoning. I'm not saying you got to keep them there for the whole purgatory, but if there's somebody who's truly exceptional, who truly deserves, first team minutes, bring them up. Otherwise, don't do, what that other, predecessor did, constantly, okay, I think I'll bring up those guys from New York Red Bull too, to fill spots in the roster. That's something that we've been seeing for the last 5 years. I like to think that this club's a little better than that. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, for me, it's what's the next step, right? Like, what are these guys doing? What's the front office doing over the course of the off season to get to work on next season, right? I don't I don't pretend to be in the know, like you and some of our other peers that are. You guys are there with the team at practices and press conferences and all those things, right? But I don't, I don't think it's coincidence that Jurgen Klopp was at the game.
Yep,
on Saturday. He's, I mean, look, we can have the argument. I think there's two sides of the coin, right? There's the side of the coin where people are like, hey, he just has a really nice and cushy, cozy job with the Red Bull group, right? And he just shows up at practices and shows up at games, right? I'd like to think that, he's there for more than just the cushy job and still trying to get a lay of the land and figure out what's what, right? He's only been there for a couple of months at this rate. But, again, to me, and I understand the argument. It's frustrating, right? Because we have seen it for the last several years with regards to Red Bull 2. But you know what? At this point, right, we don't control our own destiny anyway. So if it was me, we say it all the time, right? Tongue in cheek.
Bring up the kids.
For real this time, bring up the kids. Let them play. Let's see what we've got. Like, let's see what, between, what Ibrahim has done with that team before he came up to coach the first team, and what Bradley's doing there now. Let's see what's there, right? And sometimes you have to do something to light a fire under the first team, because I think that's the other piece too that maybe we don't talk about enough, is that it seems like there's a lot of complacency, right?
Yeah.
And this is a piece where I do go after the players a little bit, and certain players, right, is there's complacency, right? Because they keep getting run out there. It's like, well, I start every game, so
there's no competition.
So what am I really doing, right? Like, so again, like, let's see what the kids have going. I agree with you 100%, Gary. Like, Coronel needs to be kept. I feel like if Marcucci hadn't gone down with the injury, I might feel differently.
Yeah, I agree.
I think from what we saw, I think he's ready. He was before the injury, of course. I think he's ready for the big time and the big lights of being the number one keeper. But coming off of such a significant injury, and I know that in 2025, coming back from that injury is not what it was 10 or 15 years ago, right? Where there's a lot of uncertainty, right? If you're ever going to be the same. I don't think that's the case anymore. Like, these people come back, you could argue in some cases better than they were before the injury.
They have youth on their side. Guys
but
like us, we'd be finished.
Right. But I think given that, right, like you still need that insurance, right? Like I still think, again, God willing that everything goes well in terms of his recovery, I think he is our keeper of the future. But until then, Coronel is a fan favorite of our fan base. He's a proven entity day in and day out, regardless of the ridiculous banter every now and again.
Just put a decent defense in front of him.
I think it's it, right? And I think and I'll end my comments here by saying this, right? And that was part of the frustration from a lot of people. I would argue that the only signing of value that I saw during the transfer window in the summer was signing McCarthy, because we had lost Marcucci off the bench, right? Due to the injury. You're not going to put the kid who's now the number one in MLS Pro, right, on Red Bull 2 to be your backup keeper. So you sign a veteran. Who has a pedigree, right? And that on a whim, God forbid someone gets hurt, he can come in and do the job, right? That to me, honestly, was the only signing that made sense during the window in the summertime.
It was a signing of need, basically.
Look, you could. I mean, I know we have this conversation all the time in our chat. But if there was a town hall meeting over the off season, it would be quite the festive one, because there would be a lot of questions, and they would ask, why did they fire Petke all over again?
Speaking of question, before we get to Miguel, Javier, once again, he's coming out hot. He's coming in hot. Thanks, Javier. I really appreciate it. Do you guys think the USL prepared Young Bulls better than this next pro league? I'll answer that question in the affirmative. Yes. And by moving them, there's one team that's still playing in USL. You know what that team is? Loudoun United. DC United affiliate.
United farm team.
Right. Okay. They're bringing up their ballers, more ready, because you're going up against grown-ass men, okay, fighting for a paycheck. It doesn't matter if you wind up, in last place. Doesn't matter. If your idea is development, you're not trying to win a championship. That's not the whole point. The whole point is to get these guys ready, right? First team ready, right? You're not going to do that playing against teenagers, even if they are supposedly the future. You're playing against squads who basically got 19, 18, 17 years old and stuff like that. You're certainly not playing up against grown-ass men. And even if they get beat 7 out of 10 times, there are 3 times that they're probably going to get wins and stuff like that. But by the time they make the first team, getting school left and right by decent pros, they're ready. That's the whole point. That, to me, that's development. Okay? You're trying to get these guys ready for the big time. So if they're not going to start, but they're going to come off the bench and make a difference because they're going to be ready. Miguel, you agree about that?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree in regards to that, Gary. You know what? In years past, they used to have like the second team games, let's say after a first team game at Red Bull Arena, and they'd face these USL teams that had several former MLS players, okay, in their ranks, and I would say that those kids got a better game from those teams, you know, and I think that was a big mistake.
Yeah,
that MLS made.
I've said this, and I've said this to the to the front office, Miguel.
Yeah.
I said I don't think that was a great idea. Moving it, the USL didn't want us there. Who cares? Who cares? You're not there to win a championship.
Yeah.
You're there for development. I mean, they didn't stop Loudoun United from staying there. Sticking a finger in their eye, stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, if you got a problem with the name of the team, rename the team. Call them the Montclair Metro Stars. Win-win. Everybody's happy. The Metro fans got the club to go and be back. They're not called Red Bull anymore. At least you can get behind them if you wanted to. Okay, and everybody wins. If that's the case, they're still owned by Red Bull. It just so happens to be a franchise you own. But you have you have to worry about the name and the whole 9 yards. So
And something else, Gary. What they used to do in the past, before they had second teams, they would send their players like to affiliates. Local affiliates. I used to go watch this team called the North Jersey Imperials. And every now and then
I know them well.
Yeah. Every now and then they'd have a Metro Stars player or two playing the game. Zach Thornton, Chris Da Silva, Timmy Howard, man. They sent them down there for a whole season, played with the Imperials, and then it was known that he was coming up the next year to the Metro Stars. I mean, they could do stuff like that because those teams were playing against former, professional players. Lots of times from overseas, and they play in these USL teams, And I think that it was a big mistake that they moved their second teams to their own little MLS Next thing, because I don't think they're getting as good of a game on a regular basis. Okay,
they're not getting ready. I guess
right.
Trying to put that.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Another thing that I found odd, right? I think we've hardly seen. That kid, Roll Mitchell, okay, who was a star in Red Bull 2, right? And then he did his ACL last year. Injuries. And I guess supposedly he's recovered, but he hasn't seen any minutes. And also, I don't know if they've given up on the Polish kid, man, Victor Bogash, I think.
Bogash, right?
Bogash is hurt.
Yeah, he's hurt.
Injured. Yeah, okay, so there you go.
Not his fault. They definitely got injured during training, and then it hasn't been the same since. But I think he's the real deal for that. There was an incident after the game. We're going to talk a little bit about this, where it was, versus Torresita, and I'm going to be very brief on this. While I don't think Torresita 96, their wonderful crew led by by Dylan Hart and all those guys who were formerly GSU, I honestly do not believe that they're a bunch of racists. Okay, so whatever that was said by them, I don't think it was said by them. I think it was said by a bunch of knuckleheads that were in that section who were pretty much ticked off over the loss. Okay, and Raheem Edwards, did himself no favors by going in there, pointing fingers, and wanted to start, generally wanted to get in the faces, one of those guys who probably didn't have anything to do with what was said. Overall, it was a very bad night for the Red Bulls all around, and it was a very bad look for me. And and the reason why I'm sticking up for Torresita is because I know these guys, personally know these guys. they're not racist. They got a hardcore, they basically have a hardcore code against these sort of things. That if you try that sort of stuff, you're getting kicked out because they don't need it. They're trying to make their way back into the good graces, of the club. And of course, naturally, incidents like this don't help. But let's just hope that, cooler heads prevail, and then we can actually move on. Speaking of moving on, and this is probably the part that everyone likes to definitely like to talk about, of course, like that. Gotham FC. Remember them boys? Last time we talked about them, they were in 8th place, right? They're in 3rd now. And probably the reason why is because they knocked out the Portland Thorns. 3-0. Purse got things started in the 10th minute. Then Lavelle added her 2 cents in the 43rd. And Katie Stengel. Good. This woman is scoring along, of course, with Esther Gonzalez. Finished up me. So they pruned the Thorns 3-0, and now they're all in 3rd place, Carlos. 3rd place, up the baddies. They're flying, of course, in playoff position. And their next game, okay, by the way, in case you're wondering, what their schedule is, they're taking on Washington Spirit at Sports Illustrated Stadium for the women's division of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. That game will take place Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. Their next home game, by the way, is taking place. Oh man, that cough sounds terrible. Their next home game, of course, will take place on Sunday. No one looking at the schedule, looking at the standings right now against Seattle Reign. They'll take place on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Okay. The whole crew, most of us, okay, are planning to take a nice little trip over to the campus. Miguel, me, Lanre, the whole crew. We're going to take a nice little visit for the New York Red Bulls 2's last home game of the season. Hopefully there'll be good weather for that before they get into the playoffs. So the reason why I want to bring this up is because it's a fact, okay, that playoffs are pretty much dicey for the New York Red Bulls at this very moment. But meanwhile, over in, Gotham FC, they're locked in for a playoff spot. Practically in the home game, they stay right where they are in 3rd place. And New York Red Bull 2, well, they're in 1st. And they get to pick their opponent. Their first game will be playing at home at the campus. Or maybe at Red Bull Arena, one of the two. But in any case, go support them if you're into some playoff Joneses and stuff like that. So in any case, this should be fun for the reason too, because as we always say here in the discussion group soccer never ends, as they say. So with that said, let's talk about predictions. For a game, for all intents and purposes, don't mean a hill of beans. Okay, for a lot of us, all depends on what happens tomorrow night. If Chicago somehow beats Miami, it's all over. Okay, then it becomes a very meaningless game. Bring in the kids and call it a day and just leave it at that. But in spite of that, we still have to do our jobs. Carlos, what do you see when it's all said and done after 90 minutes between FC Cincinnati and the New York Red Bulls? And yes, I see you throwing up your hands in disgust. Go ahead.
Look, I'm going to remain true to my word, that which is what I opened up with. I don't ever go into any game thinking my team's going to lose. When the whistle blows, however, and they start playing, we all know that can go way in the other direction. I'm going to say that they will make some kind of an effort to win, and they do so 2-1.
Miguel, I'm dreading your prediction, but go ahead.
Well, no. I'm going to be a realist here, Garry. You
always are.
They have a better team than us.
Don't let that stop you.
Have a better team than us. We are away, and
home.
We're going to
home.
Oh, we're home. Okay,
right.
This is on Saturday, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, so then
final game is.
Garry, I'm going to go for a Red Bulls victory, Garry. We're going to do it.
There we go. And I too, I'm thinking probably a win just for the heck of it, because if you're going to end the home season on a high note, why not with a win against a team that you somewhat despise, as they say.
And I'm also going to predict, Gary, a big Arsenal victory next weekend. Thank you very much. Okay. Come on, you Gunners. You Gunners.
Well, that was a good win versus Newcastle. Nice. Newcastle screwed the pooch, though, giving fouls and giving free kicks to a team that scored so many goals. Remember when the Red Bulls used to do that?
Right.
Good times. Good times. Maybe these things can go. Maybe things go back in. We got 2 games left in the schedule, and then of course we have. When it all comes in, we now have 4 shows, right, Carlos? We have 4 shows left for our season when it's all said and done. I didn't think that the season would end so soon, but as they say, when it's all said, when you don't forget, we have a program note. We have we always finish our season with the postseason postscript. Postscript parts 1 and 2. Date to be filed shortly. So that is it, boys and girls. We will see you guys on Monday night after the FC Cincinnati game when it's all said and concluded. For Carlos Cano, and we thank you, once again, always a pleasure to have me doing it from vacation. Like I said, he's doing it on the road, folks. That's how badass.
I am not on vacation, by the way. I'm here for work.
Yeah, because you're.
It's just, let me tell you, it is a lot easier. And shouts to my wife who's holding it down with the kids at home. But it is way easier to obviously do this when you don't have a almost 2-year-old who just wants to have dad around all the time. So
how is she?
The fact that I'm away is the reason why I can actually jump on and do this. So
how is she, by the way?
Everyone is great. Everyone's good at home, and
Oops, it just so happens he's frozen, folks, but that's okay. He'll be back in about he's for Carlos Cano, Miguel Nunez, and myself. We thank you very much for joining us in this last hour. Until then, folks, see you next week. Goodbye, good night, and goodbye. All right,